In this video, we're going to do one last Heroku-specific configuration, which is to respond to a so-called SIGTERM signal that Heroku emits from time to time. So a Heroku dyno, and again a dyno is just a name that Heroku uses for basically a container in which our application is running. So these dynos restart every 24 hours in order to keep our app in a healthy state, okay? And the way that Heroku does this is by sending the so-called SIGTERM signal to our Node application. And the application will then basically shut down immediately, all right? Now, the problem with this is that this shutdown can be very abrupt. And so this can then leave requests that are currently being processed basically hanging in the air. And so that's not ideal, all right? So basically that's what happens also when there is an unhandled rejection. So here in our server.js, remember how we actually gracefully shut down the server whenever there was an unhandled rejection, all right? And so now we're actually going to do something very similar when we receive the SIGTERM signal, all right? So let's say process.on SIGTERM, and so basically really this SIGTERM is just an event that can be emitted and that our application receives and can then respond to. So exactly like the unhandled rejection, right? Now here we do not have an error. And so let's actually do a console log here as well. SIGTERM received, shutting down gracefully. And let's add some emoji here just to make it stand out in our console among all these logs that we have there. All right. And now let's actually do the graceful shutdown, which is basically just to close the server. So this will basically close the server, but before that still handle all of the pending requests. And so that's exactly what we want instead of a very abrupt finishing of the application, right? Then once that's done, let's log that to the console. So console.log. Again, let's add a nice emoji here. Process terminated. Okay? And in this case here, we do not use process.exit because the SIGTERM itself will cause the application to shut down. We do not need to do it manually, such as we did up here. All right? So basically, SIGTERM is a signal that is used to cause a program to really stop running. So it's like a very politely way to ask a program to terminate. Okay? So again, we need to implement this listening to this event here because Heroku every 24 hours will shut down our application by sending this signal or this event to our application. And so then we shut down the process gracefully by using server.close, which allows all the pending requests to still process until the end. Okay? So let's actually now test this. And so what we need to do first is to, of course, commit all of these modifications to our Git repository. And you see that right now we have 3 modified files. So we modified the server in this lecture and the auth controller and app.js in the last one, right? So let's add all of them to the staging area, git add all, and then commit these changes really to our repo. So edit Heroku config. Let's just call it that. All right. And now remember how we basically redeploy the application. Well, that's very easy. Git push Heroku and then the master branch. Okay, so this will now basically send all the modifications up to this branch and will then rebuild the application on Heroku and of course relaunch it as well. So you see that it does all this process that it did when we first deployed the application all over again each time that we deploy the application at another time. And now that's done. And so, in order to test what we just did here, let's basically manually restart the application. And so that will then also send the SIGTERM to the app and should trigger whatever happens here. Okay, so let's start by taking a look at all our dynos. So that's something that we didn't do yet. So that's Heroku PS. And so you see that we have here this one free web dyno, okay, which runs, so basically which starts by using the npm start command, just as I mentioned in one of the previous videos. Okay, so now what we can do in order to restart is very simply Heroku PS and restart. So it was not correct, I think. Now it should be. And that's done. So let's take a look now at the logs, which is Heroku logs -- tail. All right. So, and here it is. Coming from our app, we see the SIGTERM received and then process terminated logs. All right. And you see that then after that, starting process with command npm start. All right. And so that is node server.js, just as we specified. And now the app is running on port 57267. And so remember how I said earlier that basically Heroku runs our app on a random port. And so this one is that. All right, great. So let's exit this, clean this up. And so with that, we actually wrap up all the Heroku configuration stuff in our application. Fantastic. Now there's just two more things left, which is to implement something called CORS, or cross-origin resource sharing, and then also finishing the Stripe payments using webhooks. So remember how I promised to implement that one a bit later, and so we will do that over the next 2 lectures. All right, so see you back then in a second.